Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of your Bish Therapist podcast. I am your host, Melissa Reich, your Bish Therapist, a real-life therapist turned pop culture aficionado, serving clinical interpretations and hot takes on all things pop culture. And today's episode, oh my word, I am so excited to have the beautiful, she's an actor, she's a comedian, she's a radio personality.
Yeah.
She co-authored a cookbook. She has her show Cabaret Me. She has her podcast Drama Darling, the queen of the Drama Darlings herself, Miss Amy Phillips.
Wow, Melissa Reich, your Bish therapist. Look at you. I'm on your show. And you're running it, you're recording it, you're producing it, you're doing it all. And it is Women's History Month. And I just have to say, ha bada, as my daughter says, to you and to us as ladies. Look at this. How great. How great. Thank you for having me on.
Are you kidding? Thank you for coming on. And what is so wild about this is you and I are just like, loving on each other is most people don't, which is wild to me. A lot of my listeners do not know that I got my start with you. And your Bish therapist was born via Amy Phillips. Yes. And so, so I thought it would be good for us to tell the story a little bit.
Yes.
About
the
how
origin story of YBT. Yes.
That's right. Because I think people assume, there are people that assume I've been doing this for decades, which thank you. That's so sweet. That's really kind. But no, I am a newbie at this. This podcast is less than 1 year old. Less than, I started in August of 2023. And so, so for everyone listening, I definitely have drama darlings, of course, who listen. And I mean, they were my best and biggest supporters, truly. They DM me. They're wonderful. I really always want to thank you, and I want to thank them, because without you and them, I truly would not be here. And I know you're so self-deprecating. You're like, no, Melissa, you did this, blah, 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 blah. But you gave me the opportunity. You gave me a platform. You took a chance on me. And most people don't know that you truly are my mentor. You really are. And I just really appreciate you.
That is that's amazing. I've never had that word, described. I've never been anyone's mentor before. So that's really very special. And, yes, I told you a long time ago that you should do your own podcast. And when I had you on my show, when it turned into Drama Darling,
right?
I was like, this is such a perfect, time to have you on, because we have these off the radar conversations. And, when I was on Sirius XM, we would DM with each other and you would introduce yourself as your Bish therapist. So I thought that was really funny, because I refer to myself as your bitch wife on Sirius XM.
That's right.
So then she was like, oh, your bitch therapist here, just chiming in on this latest episode of Atlanta or whatever it was. And a lot of your takes in our messaging were just super fascinating. And I just really enjoyed always getting your feedback. And it was just like here and there and whatever you were inspired to get in touch about. So we had a great rapport, just with a little bit of chit chat. And then, again, like I mentioned, once I moved over to my own podcast, I was like, well, I'm going to have her on. And you just took off. I mean, it's like you already had full grown wings. That's what's wild about it, is that you're just such a natural about this stuff that's why it is, doesn't surprise me at all that people probably think you've been doing this for a really long time, because you are such a natural at explaining, articulating, really having a conversational vibe about you when you're talking about reality television and the clinical interpretations of it. So that was just, you were such a smash hit. And everybody loved you. And they're like, more Bish therapist, more Bish therapist. So you were on Drama Darling a few times. And then you started your own Instagram account as your Bish therapist.
Right. I started that in like July. So again, for those who aren't aware, Amy was on SiriusXM with Reality Check for like 7 years. And so as she transitioned into this amazing new space that you're in, which I'm so excited for us to talk about that too, because you're doing some really amazing things, is that it became, like this natural conversational, kind of relationship. But I love that like most people have no idea. They're like, you're a bish therapist. They're like, that's such a funny name, but they don't understand like where it comes from.
Right.
And it comes from like, well, you just said, right. And like my dark humor, and I just love to joke about things. I'm like, well, you might as well call me your bitch therapist. And so,
stems from Joe Giudice, who famously called Teresa his bitch wife. And that's why I referred to myself as your bitch wife. And then I would play the Joe clip. Oh, here she comes, my bitch wife. She's see you next Tuesday. Yeah. So that's where it all stems from. So like Melissa said, out of darkness comes light. And here we are, which, again, you on my show talking about so many different aspects about the shows that we watch. People really loved hearing this take that you have, which is so unique and so original because no one else is doing it. There's no one else out there in this field that is doing a clinical interpretation of these reality shows as a podcast or as an Instagram account. And it's groundbreaking and it's so brilliant. And it's what people want and need, and they don't even know they want and need it. So it was one of those things where I was just like, it just makes so much sense, Melissa. You really just should do your own podcast, because you had been on my show a few times and I just thought, right, you have so much to say and so much to give that I was like, don't wait for me anymore. Right. Like this is, you have to, it's wild because as somebody who has witnessed you like explode with, like, you can't help yourself. Like, that's what's so interesting about it, is that it's so real and so organic, that you could even be having the worst day and it's still going to be pouring out of you in some way because it's just in there. And it's like, it's your gift. So it very much, when I say it comes easy to you, I mean, I mean the hosting aspect of it really comes easy to you. And certainly, the work that you do is not easy. I know how much work and preparation you put into all this too. Right. So that goes, I don't think people even know like how much work you do. You have pages and pages of stuff when you do these shows.
Yeah, literally. I mean, and I appreciate that because I joke with you and with people. I literally write papers before most of these podcasts. So whether it's my own or if I'm going on somebody's, yesterday I was just on Besties with Caitlin. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Now I'm fumbling the name, but Caitlin Marshall has a wonderful account, and we were talking about attachment theory. And so I had to I am such a psychology nerd that I truly love all this stuff so much. And so I'm grateful to hear that it does feel organic, because this is just like me nerding out and the love of like the clinical interpretations and all of that stuff. But and listen, it can be a blessing and a curse. Sometimes people feel like I'm lecturing to them, and like I have done teaching my whole life, so as a therapist, I have to be responsible for leading individual sessions, marriage sessions, couple sessions, group sessions. And fortunately, a lot of that translates to this space, right? Because I have to know how to host, and I have to know how to read cues and, all these things. So as Amy knows, the technology of what you're seeing now comes easy to me. This does. And when I went on Caitlin's show yesterday, I joked that I had these like dusty boxes somewhere in my brain of like attachment theory that I just had to like dust them off real quick and like open the box and look inside it and be like, oh, I haven't looked in here since I was in graduate school.
Oh, that's super interesting. Yeah. Did it all come back to you?
Instantly. Because,
Wow.
so fun fact about me is, in case people can't tell, I am type A. I am a perfectionist, which, yes, of course, stems from my own trauma. And when I graduated from my master's program, I was thinking about this the other night. I literally had a garbage bag full of flashcards.
Wow.
Because I took it so
Flashcards,
seriously. Yeah,
flash
but like
dance. Yeah.
and that's how I learn best. I do have some, some memory issues after a lot of cancer treatment and things like that. So a flashcard was like my saving grace.
Mhm.
And apparently it really helped me remember a lot of stuff, because as
Oh my
soon as I'm
gosh.
like reacquainting myself, right, with like attachment theory by Bowlby, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I remember some of
I
this.
remember
And
those flashcards.
yeah, I remember you guys. But so this part for me is what comes naturally and easily. I'm a naturally very sociable person. I love people. I love talking to people. I'm genuinely interested in it. It's the tech stuff that has taken some time to adjust to. But
But you've done it. You've done it. Because you
I'm
have to produce your own
doing it.
podcast at this point, like we all do.
Yeah.
We're not going into a studio. We don't have producers.
No.
So, this is a real grassroots effort here. And I'm very impressed that but you are so type A that it was like, I was like, well, eventually you'll learn how to edit. But in the meantime, just send me your stuff. Well, my girl, your bitch therapist right over here, didn't even send me anything. And I was like, how did you uploaded your first guest podcast? How did you, but I thought you were going to send it to me. And I was thinking maybe it was just so tight. She didn't even need to edit. She's like, your girl learned how to edit. I was like, oh my God, you are so type A. Like, it's so crazy. Like, you didn't even let me edit anything for you. But it's interesting because you really took a leap into this world and really by surprise to your own self. Like, you did not expect to be going down this road at this point in your life, and especially with the circumstances in your life. So I applaud you. I know how much you deal with, and it's amazing to me how you can overcome those things and deliver this amazing perspective. And I do have a couple questions for you because
Sure.
And maybe some of your Bish listeners have the same thing. Like, when you are researching a topic, so say you did Gypsy Rose, you have so much to go through in order to prepare. So how much time typically would you say you spend per podcast, excluding this one, or one where you have a guest? Let's say the heavy hitting ones where you're covering a series, and or a specific topic with regard to, like, say, Kim and Croy. How much time would you say that you spend researching and preparing?
Honestly, weeks.
Wow.
Which, right. So I'll give an example with Gypsy Rose, for example, and like Natalia Grace, which I do still plan to record. I went on this guest spree, having a lot of guests on and stuff like that. So I definitely am still going to cover that. But with the Gypsy Rose stuff, when it's a lot of content, and I don't want to say fatal flaw because it's a blessing and a curse, but I will not get on this microphone if I am not certain of what I am talking about. I'm not going to do it because I do not want to harm someone. I don't want to spread misinformation. I think that's easy to do. And listen, of course, I make mistakes, and like, I'm human and that happens. But the Gypsy Rose one legitimately took me weeks because part of my process, and the Murdaugh murders, oh my God, that took me sincerely. I think that took almost a month. So I have to watch all of it, right? And I have to watch it, and then I have to record my notes. And so my secret sauce with this is just it's cool because it can't be replicated. It's just like my lizard brain in terms of when I watch something, I look at what I gravitate, like, what does my brain clock? There are little things that my brain will clock and an average person will just completely blow by it. But it stays here.
Yeah,
and then,
it sticks out to you. Mm-hmm.
Right. And then I'm doing my notes, and then I'll observe the behaviors, right? Because for me, the nonverbal observation is just as important as the words.
Mm.
So I'm almost watching things twice.
Okay.
And then
Wow.
I'm compiling it all into like Word documents, intermixed with, I try to grab information from research studies and journal articles. And like, I don't get my information from like Wikipedia. I get it either from like my own like clinical knowledge, and then I just build on that. I'll go to Psychology Today, or I'll go to like reputable websites just to reacquaint myself. So it really truly is a very intense process. That the reason I had to take a break the first time, as you know, Amy, was like with my health stuff, it was so much work. And listen, I loved it and people loved it and it's great, but I realized like without a break, it was just not sustainable. And so to be honest, some of these guest episodes that I'm doing now, I had Ryan Bailey, I had Mandy Slutzker, her episode is coming up. Yesterday I did an episode with Lindsay from Vanderpod Recaps. And when I'm doing these hosting, it's less deep dives and kind of more conversational. So this for me is great, and it is a little bit easier. And then it's those deep dive ones that sometimes I do dread, because it's like sifting through so much information. And I'm learning, listen, for those who have listened to me since day one, which thank you, I appreciate you all and I know who you are. Sometimes it was like too much for people even. It was like I was packing in so much information that it was like overwhelming. So this, and listen, I feel like when you do any new skill or when you do anything, right, all we can do is learn and grow and evolve. And so I'm learning that not every single thought in my head regarding the psychology of this stuff like needs to be verbalized.
Oh, that's interesting. So you've tweaked your technique in a way to which you're pulling back in some areas to keep it more succinct. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Succinct and palatable, because I have to remember I'm not giving a lecture. Like there are people who, like I have a lot of folks who listen, that a lot of professionals, I have psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, people in behavioral health.
Super cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so there's people, and I got a message the other day about someone who, she goes, my therapist told me to listen to your podcast. And I was like, oh my God.
Way. Are you serious?
I'm so serious. I was like, that is such an honor. Like I'm speechless about it. But the point of it is like, I want to give people what they want. That's and I want to help teach concepts, but I also want to engage people. And I am aware that I can be intense when it comes to this stuff. And I have a passion and I have an intensity around me. And so part of season 2 has been learning how to mediate and moderate that in a way that's more palatable and succinct for people. So,
that's amazing.
Thank you.
And you used to do a lot of lectures? You did? Yes.
So one of the parts of my life, from the first job that I had out of grad school, I'm just a natural leader. I'm a good public speaker. That's just, like, and I don't like it. Here's the thing. Public speaking gives me like bubble guts to know.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I get so nervous, but I just am good at it. And so my first job out of grad school, they were like, oh, we want you to do outreach to the community and go to this meeting of people and talk about what it is we do here. I was like, okay, how many people should I expect? They're like 200. And I was like, oh God, panic, pure panic. And so essentially I just kind of got thrust into, and fellow professionals listening to this will feel this on such a deep level. When you're new in the field, you just get thrown into stuff that you don't get asked if you want to do something. They're like, hi, here's your caseload of 4,000 people. You will also be teaching. You will also be doing this. Like at one point I was running a gambling prevention program. I was teaching in Philadelphia public schools. That was wild. Yes. So I was teaching about the dangers of gambling. It was like a program. We had like a grant by the state. This was in Philadelphia at the time. And so I had to go into Philadelphia public schools and teach about the dangers of gambling, which was the wildest experience of my life. Those kids hated me. I mean, there are a lot of cultural, elementary, middle, and high school.
Oh, okay.
So
Wow.
I did all of it.
Oh my gosh.
And every
Intense.
kind of job that I've had. So I worked at Misericordia, which is a local university where I live. And I was put in charge of I did some lectures on, mindfulness and progressive muscle relaxation and how to help some of the students manage some of their stuff in their own lives. So I was doing the individual therapy, but I was also teaching and doing lectures and things like that. So yeah, when people do say, sometimes it feels like I'm lecturing, I get that. I do have that part of my personality. And so for me, it's just nothing short of me wanting to share my passion with others. But sometimes I do want to be mindful of how it can feel very intense.
Got it. Well, yeah. I've never had a problem with your delivery, even if it were to resemble a lecture, because I do feel like it's lecture time. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're telling us stuff that we don't know. So lecture me, sister.
Thank you. Some people really hate that, though.
I love a lecture.
I love a lecture too. I mean, listen.
Lectures.
Oh, lectures. And Amy, can I tell you, by the way, so Amy does, for those of you who don't know or don't listen, Amy does hundreds of impressions. And I swear, I think sometimes in Amy's impression voice, there are just things that and of course I'm blanking. Oh, so we're going to talk about Summer House in a little bit. And Carl,
oh yeah,
used to Carl or,
oh yeah, that's right.
There are certain words in the Bravo verse that I hear your voice and I hear your your impressions because they're just so good.
I've done my job.
So
I've
good,
done my job.
Amy. Yeah, you have. They're so
That's
good.
Sweet. I really think that you found your niche, obviously. I'm curious, would you ever go back to private practice at this point? Because this is a whole new career path that clearly can take up most of your life. So I'm curious, at this point, would you continue in the future with going back to being, therapist?
It's such a good question. And I swear it's something that I feel tortured by daily because,
oh my gosh.
Well, and I'll tell you why, because I feel a lot of pride and personal responsibility when it comes to helping people. That's just who I am as a person. And in the area in which I live, there is a lot of terrible therapy. And when, listen, I can now say from a place of self-confidence that I know that I'm good at what I do. I know that people value what I do. And so there's part of me that I wonder if it's a disservice to not do it. But at the same time, for me creatively, this scratches an itch that I didn't know was itchy. If that even makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. Yeah.
I grew up and, I said this on another podcast I did, is that I never you came from improv and you've done a lot of that sort of creative stuff. And I never had the opportunity to do that for various reasons, but mostly being frozen in trauma being the main one, if I'm being honest. And so once I, had to leave my private practice and I started doing this, which by the way, I had to leave for health issues. Just there's nothing nefarious there. It's, most people know that about me, but during the pandemic, it was a whole thing. And so what I'm doing now, it allows me to be creative in a way that I just never experienced before. And I'm really enjoying being in this space. And to be honest, people want content faster than I can create it, if I'm being honest. And so I feel that I know that my voice is important, and whether I'm speaking into a microphone or providing therapy, as long as I'm helping people, that truly is all that matters to me. This effort, what I'm doing now, is a little more personally fulfilling because, as the therapist, it's like, it's about being a guide. It's about being a helper. Like, it's really not about me, or it shouldn't be. And this is like about me, and it's, part fun and part creative. And, so I think long is that I'm probably going to keep doing this unless I feel called to go back to being a therapist, which right now, this is what I'm very into. So,
wow, this is very exciting. I mean, it's like Sheena, she was, as she said in the last episode, why can't anything ever be about me? And so there you have it. You're just like Sheena. Wow.
I'm just like Sheena.
Like Sheena. Wow.
Oh
I didn't know Melissa had so much in common with Sheena.
Who knew? Who knew?
Well, that is so interesting. I'm not surprised to hear you say that. And I think by way of your podcast reaching people, I think it's directly helping in maybe more ways than you ever expected you'd be able to help people.
I hope.
Yeah, I think it's just so cool because like even the Paris documentaries, the Paris podcast that you did 2 of them. There's so much in both of those episodes that can be very relatable to a lot of people. And that's just an isolated example. There's so much in so many of the things that you break down that people can learn from and start to look inward. And you don't get on here and say, oh, you should all get into therapy. You should all get into therapy. It's not really your point. You're commentating on what's going on in these other people's lives. So, and just as a listener, I always find myself asking myself some questions, inspired by some of the things that you say.
Aww.
And I think it's really healthy. And it also gives redemption to these shows that we watch, and then and for you, I guess, because I know we want to talk about Carl and Lindsay, but I do want to ask you, why did you even start watching these shows? Because you are a very intellectual person. You're very, you're very intelligent. You are a therapist. You are highly educated. Why would someone like you watch shows like this?
It's such a good question. People ask me that all the time. And I think that when I was younger, because, a lot of this reality stuff, it's been going on for 15 years, right? At this point. And I'm, in April, going to be 43. And so I started watching this stuff when I was in my late 20s, never thinking that, the short answer is I am fascinated by human behavior, period. Okay. And so the dramatics of, a lot of reality TV, just as a person, interested me. I've always been interested in the people who have egregious behavior. Why do they do what they do? That is initially what brought me into the space of wanting to know more about psychology. It's not about I admire the people who grow and are amazing and are self-actualized, but it's the reality stuff. It's the behavior, the kind of low down, icky behavior sometimes that just fascinates me. And it's just the way my brain works. I also am obsessed with serial killer documentaries and the way sometimes that I decompress is to watch something about a serial killer. I don't know, Amy, my brain should be studied, I guess maybe is what I'm saying.
Well, how do you do it where you're not watching and going and I mean, I was going to say without judgment but you probably are judging on some level, right?
Well,
or no?
For me, it's not so much a judgment. It's mostly just critical observations. Okay. So observations from a critical thinking standpoint, from a standpoint of understanding, let's say I understand, let's go with attachment theory. So watching some of these relationships on Housewives and Vanderpump Rules and all these things, it's Oh, like to read something in a book and to learn about it versus like seeing how it plays out in actual life. There's so much good information there. And so that's part one of it. But then part two of it, to be honest, for me is like, I feel like I am kind of aging out of some of these shows, and I'm like, well, great. Now I've made this my whole career. So really, truly, for me, it's about taking something that once entertained me. It doesn't entertain me anymore. It kind of does feel a little gross or icky sometimes now that I'm older. But if I can take, like, you kind of use this analogy of like, I can take a lot of meat off of a bone, like very little, like I'm really good at taking something on our beloved shows and saying, okay, let's make this a learning lesson, or like an opportunity to share, like, for example, about like grooming and things like that. Like there's tough topics that are covered on Bravo and other shows that if I'm feeling like they're not being addressed appropriately, well, that is where my true niche lies, right? Because there's a lot of trauma survivors and people who look to me to be like, well, what's your thought on this? Help us, like, so I almost have become that voice, which is a lot of responsibility, but I'm just honored and appreciative.
Are there any reality stars that you've watched where you've been like completely dumbfounded, where you're like, I just have no clue where this person's coming from or what their issue is? Or would you say you pretty much across the board have everyone's number?
Yeah, I pretty much across the board have everyone's number. And it's just because in addition to my intellectual conceptualizations, I also have an intuition that you just can't slip anything by. Yeah. Nobody can. It is not.
Yeah. And that's possible. You can't learn that. That's just something that
this is part of my special sauce, like just the intuition. Now there are certain people on reality TV that I feel allergic to that, like, I really like. I'll use an example, just one. Jax was always someone that, I actually couldn't watch Vanderpump Rules when he was on it because I just felt so wow. I had such a strong reaction to him. And like, it's wild. I don't know him. I've never talked to him. And sometimes I feel it's a little unfair, but like, I think it's safe to say, like, we kind of know who Jax is and like,
yeah.
So that's just a small example, because I'm never going to, like, my platform, as you know, is not to crap on people or be rude or mean-spirited, but there are definitely some folks in the space, people that we're watching that are, I don't want to say scary, but I definitely have intuition about some concerns, I guess I'll say. And I just, I just keep it right here.
Yep.
And then when I watch things, I try to, as a therapist, one of the things that primes me for this is you're faced with folks who may have done really terrible things, but I am charged to see their humanity and to assist them rather than judge and label them. So while I can clock someone's intention or I can clock someone's underlying pathology, I also can look at it from a space of being non-judgmental and trying to say, well, let's look maybe how this was created, if that makes sense.
Wow. It totally makes sense. Yeah. Everything is created. You're not born a reality star, from your own issues. Right. That's what makes a great one. But
that's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And here's the thing. Before we move on to Lindsay and Carl, I do want you to share with people listen, I appreciate you coming on, and as a loving person and my mentor, I love that you're like asking me questions and all that, but I do want people to know you're doing something really exciting and new on April 6th. So
I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah, you're like, which one? Well, you're always doing a lot of stuff, your cabaret-mies and things like that. But I saw you recently post something about your fun.
Stars at Sea.
Yes. Can you please talk about that a little bit?
So the wonderful gentleman, Ross Caputo, who put together Reality Bites Live with Chef Stuart and I, it's the same guy who put that on. He approached me about doing a Stars at Sea, which is like, you charter a super yacht, essentially. I mean, kind of not, it's like a booze cruise kind of thing, but it's very chic.
She, honey.
She. And I remember at our Reality Bites live event, I said something to him about like, oh yeah, we should do like a below deck thing. I mean, it was just like, and I think he had that idea already. So then when I just said it and he was like, oh yeah, I've thought about that. I'm like, oh, well, you should totally do it. I did not think that in a couple months time, he'd be like, hey, so we're going to do this. I was like, oh, okay.
You're like, yeah, sure.
Also, I get like really seasick. So, I made sure that we're not leaving the harbor here in LA. We're just so it's really still and fine. So we're just gonna like tour the harbor. It's gonna be so beautiful. And, it's just basically, an elevated booze cruise and a comedy show. So I will be hosting and like people buy tickets and they come on this boat, you get, food and, there are going to be drinks. It's going to be a ton of fun. And I'm waiting to see if he's going to have any other, like reality stars join us.
Sure.
And the tickets are for sale now. If you want to get them, the link is in my bio, Meet Amy Phillips. And that's here in LA on April 6th.
April 6th. And Amy, can I tell you something super special? So Amy and I, and listen, we may not get to Lindsay and Carl. I have no idea because we're really having a kiki. But so I can't but help feel a little bit of like a spiritual connection in that. So April 6th is my 25-year cancerversary.
Wow. 25.
I know,
Whoa.
which, ew, I've never felt so, like, I'm grateful to be old, right? Aging is a gift not granted to everybody. And so it is a gift to me, but it does feel weird that like I am in a survivorship from a first cancer like for 25 years, like old enough to like vote and run a car. It's just a very weird thing. But when I saw that, I was just like, I'm so proud of you. And I'm so proud of, all the things that you're doing, because truly, there's a lot of personalities in this space, a lot of different levels of humanity in this space. And you're just like a real one, Amy. You're just like a real one. You're a good one. You're just like such a wonderful person. So please, like, and I hate the fact that I literally couldn't be further away from you. And so being on the East Coast,
it's a real bummer.
It is. I never got to participate in any of this, but I'll be with you in spirit. And the other thing is, Amy and I both, we had an owl experience. Do you remember that, Amy?
Yes. Oh my God, that's right.
And so I swear to you, I just think we're like a little spiritually connected.
Yeah,
so
we have to be. We have to be. I mean, there's no other. Yeah, this wouldn't be happening if we weren't.
Yeah. And so the brief story there is, Amy, when you were contemplating leaving SiriusXM and doing your own thing, you told this story about hearing an owl.
Yeah.
And you like took it as a sign, and you were really taken aback by it. And then the week that you and I were talking about what should I do, like I was really hesitant. I was like, should I just try this and podcast? Like I was terrified about it. I was like, is the market too saturated? Will people like me? Will they like what I have to say? So I'm like thinking obsessively about this, and all of a sudden I hear an owl.
That's insane.
And here's the thing. I remember we did talk about it because this was so long ago. This was like last year. And I'm telling you, I have never heard it again. Never heard it again. And when you talked about your owl story, and then I had mine, and then I see that you're doing this cruise on April 6th, which is, I don't know. I'm one of those people.
Really incredible.
Yeah. So I think, you and me, we see each other.
Yeah, we
Amy.
see each other. Hoo.
Habada. As your sweet little girl likes to say.
Yes, she does.
Okay, so with the last 10 minutes or so, let's get
Yeah.
into a little bit of
Yeah.
Summer House.
Yes.
And listen, for people who are listening who do want me to get back to some deep dives, stay tuned. I will be doing that. Don't worry. But I posted some stuff on Instagram that got a lot of attention about Carl and Lindsay. So I was just going to read that quickly
Oh.
and get your thoughts on it, if
Oh my
that
gosh.
is
Okay.
okay.
Yes.
Because so this was the episode where before we got to see last week, it was just where we left off, where Lindsay was saying she had PTSD from cocaine, Carl, blah, 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 which I was like, rage.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm just like a huge advocate for people, sobriety is hard, mental health recovery is hard. Like that is some wild stuff. So here's what I said. I said, watching Lindsay falsely accuse Carl of being cocaine Carl was horrifying. I watched Lindsay have a literal temper tantrum when her unstable emotional state wasn't coddled. Side note, she was intoxicated and behaving irrationally. Oof, the irony. Which, by the way, it's not irony. It's classic projection. So just to be clear, like I was being silly here, but like, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, but I watched her weaponize Carl's sobriety and engaging in psychological warfare when he set healthy boundaries in response. In this moment, I felt full respect for Carl for once. Very rarely are things 100% one person's fault, but in this moment, Lindsay was 100% wrong. Her behaviors were childish and quite frankly concerning, and somehow managed to destroy Carl's trust, safety, and respect in one fell swoop. Society sometimes forgets that men have the right to safety too. And as a sober man who lost his brother to addiction, he realizes this is a life or death disease. So when it comes to saving your own life getting sober, it is deadly serious when someone weaponizes this against you. In my opinion, Carl's decision to call off the engagement is not only understood, it's respected and admired. It proves that he is taking his sobriety seriously, removing himself from people, places, and things. Lindsay made herself an unsafe, triggering person that night. Huge respect to Carl for realizing he deserved better.
Amen to that.
I mean, I know that
Completely
was
agree.
intense, but like, I mean, I know you cover Summer House. So what has been your take on all of this?
I just never, I was very naive last season when they were engaged and everyone was coming for them. And I felt like they were just relentless trying to break them down. And I really hated that. I hated that for them. It was undue pressure and stress on their relationship. And I just thought, let love just be love,
Sure.
Maybe it will work. She was there for him during a time in which he needed somebody. I was questioning the timeline. I thought this could be very dangerous because he got together with her before his full year of being sober.
Right.
And he
Which,
was
by
like
the way,
a month or
never,
two short.
It's not. So there's a reason that there are rules in sobriety. People don't like this, but there is research to support the 1 year rule, right? Because it takes such a long time. And listen, a year isn't that long, but in sobriety, to focus on yourself, your growth is paramount because unfortunately, a lot of folks with substance abuse issues also have relationship issues, maybe some sex and love addiction, or if it's not an addiction, there's just codependency. There's things that happen. So there are reasons for that rule. But yes, please continue.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think, people have heard that here and there, but maybe we don't understand fully. But so when they got together, I thought, oh, this could be really tricky and not good. Well, she stopped drinking and they seemed to be really on a great path together, that they were helping each other and they were just being very responsible adults, very healthy adults. They were pulling away from the group because, the Summer House is a party house. And so
oh my gosh, crazy.
I just didn't like how people were coming for them and wanting to tear them down when I just thought, give them the opportunity. Maybe this is working because they've been friends for so long and maybe this is going to win. Love is going to win this way. So I did not appreciate that. Now, cut to a lot of people that disagreed with me. And I get it because they never trusted Lindsay to begin with. And now here we are. I totally see what everybody's saying.
Right.
I think that looking back, Lindsay, took advantage of someone who was very vulnerable.
Yep.
And to get what she needs. And he was in
Yes.
a space where he couldn't think for himself and was desperate for the support, attention, love to get him through this, not to mention the death of his brother, and all the other things. And Lindsay was all that for him, but at the detriment of his own health and sobriety. So now for her to be turning from literally, what is in a way his hero and his angel into like literally the Wicked Witch. And for it to snap so quickly just goes to show that her intentions were not right and his intentions not right. Like they both really made a terrible choice to be together. And it was very clear, obviously, when she was willing to call him Cocaine Carl. I do understand there's PTSD when you are dealing with somebody who you've had bad experiences with that have been intoxicated, but they should have never been together if she's had those before, that she should have never been with him having that baggage as it is.
Well, I just think, to kind of sum up what my theory was when I talked yesterday with Caitlin is that I feel regarding attachment theory, I don't have time to get into it all, but I know that Lindsay's biological mom stepped out on her. And I think that for me, when there's a lot of people who like, when they get mad at Carl or Lindsay, like they want them dead, but I'm like, they're humans, right? And so Lindsay is a human being who wasn't given the love that she needed. And because of that, her attachment style is really concerning. It is. And so, and Carl, I feel the same thing, because when you're on substances, you can't have the opportunity to form a fully functional, healthy relationship. You just can't, you have like a mistress, your substance or whatever, that's your like mistress. Like you can't be present. And I almost believe that Lindsay, I feel like she tried sobriety and had too much emotional variability. And I think that, there's folks that I'm never going to label them anything, but there's folks that use substances, I believe in the Summer House to kind of dampen their feelings. And so I feel that, had Lindsay stayed sober, things could have been different for both of them. And listen, it's not, she doesn't have to, I don't know her. Maybe that's not her path. But all I can say is as an observer, it seems like, and this is going to be a little bit controversial for me to say this, but it seems like she kind of liked Sick Carl. Like Sick Carl was,
gave her control and power.
Yeah. Yeah. And when someone isn't sick anymore and they're healthy and they now can see through your weaponizing behaviors to see like, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. She doesn't like that because she can't, like Lindsay has a hard time having healthy relationships because she doesn't want a partnership. She wants to be a dictator.
So what is that called? Like, what is that called in the world of clinical psychology? When you like, it's almost like a level of Munchausen where you like to keep your hand, like you want someone to be ill on some level or need you on some level that gives you all the control so that they're like feeling always indebted to you or, what is that?
Codependency. So
it's that simple. Okay.
Well, so that's the simple answer, but there are different attachment styles that I believe Lindsay, does possess some really difficult attachment styles, but really what you're saying is codependency. And that is why for the first year of recovery, when you're freshly sober, you're at very high risk for codependency, especially in pre-existing relationships. So I talk about codependency like someone else becomes your emotional thermostat. and you try to use certain things to get them back under your wing or to earn favor, you know, whatever. But yeah, that's kind of the long and short of it. And so unfortunately, you know, I'm being mindful of our time, and I know, this went by really, really quickly.
Oh my God. That was insane.
So, I know. And I'm sorry for everyone listening to this. They're like, what? They just started talking about that. So listen, Amy, we could talk all day. I'd love to have you back on maybe after the cruise, and you can talk all about that, or, you know, what have you.
You could just keep going without me and wrap up your thoughts of Carl and Lindsay.
No, that's okay. Okay. You know, your bish is having a tough day. Okay. And I think we're gonna end it here. But so what I just want to say is thank you so much for being on. Please, everybody, go over to @Meet Amy Phillips on Instagram. Tickets for the cruise are in your bio, in your a link in bio, as we love to say.
Bio, baby.
Please check her out. Her Patreon is called Drama Darling. It is absolutely hilarious. There is interactive things available if you join, if you follow, all that stuff. The Drama Darlings are chef's kiss.
Thank you, Melissa.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, thank you. And for everyone listening, thank you for listening. Please make sure to follow me at Your Bish Therapist on Instagram. Please follow my podcast. Of course, please give me a 5-star rating if you would be so kind. Thank you all so much. And I'm just going to read my disclaimer. Posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bish Therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Greyheart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT podcast and on its social media is provided for general information purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, or hear on YBT podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.